if this is just the surface doing extreme power management. Which it might be, who knows? Okay, here we go. All right, great. Well, welcome to Indy Xamarin. My name's Auri Rahimzadeh. You can just call me Auri. And we got Greg Del Santo on the line from Sandy, another one of our organizers. And we run our meetup on the fourth Wednesday of every single month. Recently, we've been doing this online, which has been great. It's brought more people in, and especially when we're all kind of locked into our homes, it's been good to bring people together. So I hope you're all staying safe. These can be tough times, but we'll get through them. Some thanks to our sponsors, Sandy Solutions, which Greg is part of, Launch Fishers, which we can't use their space because, well, actually they just started allowing people to use their space again. I think we're going to be virtual for at least a few more months while things settle down. We want to do everything safely. MFractor, which if you're a Xamarin developer, if you haven't heard of it, you should. Phenomenal software. It's if you've ever used ReSharper, ReSharper does great things for development productivity. MFractor is like that, but specifically for Xamarin. Well, mostly for Xamarin. And then, of course, RevDebug, which is very cool. You can replay your entire debug session and find all your exceptions and so forth and see the exact state of the application when the exception occurred and the entire flow of the application after you've run it. So you don't have to set breakpoints everywhere. So thanks very much to our sponsors. Greg, I know you usually like to talk a little bit about Sandy, so if you want to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, so Sandy Solutions, we're an IT staffing agency. We also have a managed services side of our business that works with the city of Indianapolis, the state of Indiana, and different other municipalities here in town. So we're based here in Indianapolis. We're about a block from Bankers Life, which is where the Indiana Pacers play. So we do a lot of different, we do project managers, developers, programmers, lots of different roles that we fill. We work with clients like IU Health, with the Colts, Eskenazi Health, all different sorts of companies right here in central Indiana. So if you are looking for a new role, feel free to send your resume to me. I'll put my email and contact information in the notes. But happy to be here, happy to sponsor it, and thanks.
Yay. Well, thanks for that, Greg. Okay, and then, oh, there we go. Yeah, that's exactly what I just talked about. Yay, thanks to our sponsors. And does anyone have any jobs that they're offering right now? So for people looking for jobs, does anyone have any opportunities open? This is a little different than what we usually, like, people just pipe up.
Yeah. Right now we have a few, but they're like there's a SharePoint developer role we have open. There's a few other internal roles that are on our website as well. I can link to that in my post as well. But we get different roles all the time. I'm not going to say we get the Xamarin roles every week. We don't. But probably every quarter we may get one or two. So.
Okay. Yeah. Oddly enough, I get a lot. I see a lot of people, or I hear a lot of people ask, do you know any Xamarin developers, or do you know any like specifically Android or iOS developers? More Android than iOS. And it's funny because I'm like, well, why don't you just go learn Xamarin, and then you'll have a good feel for both. And I'm seeing more Xamarin opportunities than specific platform opportunities in Indiana. I don't know what it's like elsewhere, but it has been pretty interesting hearing that. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Greg's messaging. his email address. So if anyone else is offering jobs or is looking for jobs, please feel free to just put your information over in the meeting chat so that people who are looking or offering can get connected. Always good, always good. All right. So I'm going to stop presenting that slide and switch over to another one. There we go. Cool. So can everyone see my slides? Of course, I can't. Greg, you'll have to let me know because I can't see the chat now because I'm running on my single screen mode.
Yep.
Yay. So hopefully everyone can see this. Thanks for joining tonight. A little bit about me. My name's Auri Rahimzadeh, and I own a small little consulting firm called Auri's Ideas. And then I'm also a software engineer at Valorum Reply. So get to do a lot of fun stuff across both of those. Most of my mobile app work I do through Auri's Ideas. But I've written a lot of apps, and for those who know me, I've written a lot of public safety apps. One of those was acquired last year, and just if you get a speeding ticket in the state of Indiana, I wrote that software. If you're reporting non-emergency crime in Indiana, I wrote that, or in various cities around the U.S. actually now, because that's expanded. Wrote a lot of pro bono software, all Xamarin. So Greg and I and Tim, we put together not Jim. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the Indy.net consortium. We brought together, or we started the Indy Xamarin Meetup, because there seemed to be a need, and not really, it wasn't being fulfilled in Indy for these mobile developers. So happy to be here. Today we're going to talk about this app that I built for the city of Fishers, where I live. That's for a COVID patient scanning app. So before we get started, though, feel free to ask questions at any time. We're going to cover a bunch of things tonight. So one is how the app was built, like requirement specifications. So an overview of it, getting it built. We're definitely going to look at some code. If you have questions about the code or different approaches, let me know. How we rolled it out and the lessons learned there. So we're going to cover all of that. So a little bit about what Fishers is doing. So Fishers is a city of around 90,000 residents. I've lived here a really long time, like back when we had 2-lane roads, and now we're one of the top 10 places to live in the United States. So to live and raise a family, Fishers was rated by Money Magazine one of the top 10 places to live, and multiple years in a row now, which is funny considering that there was nothing here. It was cornfields and like a little recreational park, but we've grown tremendously. We've got our own IKEA. It's nuts. Very fun. But when we became a city, we got a very progressive mayor, and with COVID, we kicked off a city health department. So moved from the county health department to having our own city health department, and we're offering, well, I say we, but Fishers is offering free COVID testing to all 90,000 residents. So no charge. And they're cutting a deal to any businesses here that if they want to have their employees tested, even if they're not a resident of Fishers, they simply pay the same price that Fishers pays. So no markup. The goal, of course, is get people tested and do contact tracing, because contact tracing is what really helps control an outbreak. If you haven't heard much about contact tracing or learned much about it, I suggest you look it up. It kind of proves itself out if you read about it. Now, you might have seen there's a painful method of testing for COVID where they basically touch the back of your brain with a really long Q-tip. That is not the method that Fishers uses. They do a shallow swipe, I think is what they call it, or a shallow swab. Hopefully this doesn't look gross as I point at my nose. And it doesn't hurt. It's a little annoying because it's like 15 seconds of them running around the front of your nose, and then you have each nostril with two toothpicks, or not too big, Q-tips, and then they break it in half, stick it in a vial, and then that gets sent off to the lab. So the way this works, though, from 5,000 feet up, is you register online, and they ask you a bunch of questions, figure out if you're high risk or not. And then after you've filled out that assessment, which is just another word for a survey, you receive a patient ID. And that patient ID comes to you, and this will be interesting later, in the form of a really hard to read jumble of characters. It's like 12 characters or something, and a QR code that's supposed to represent that. Then at the scheduled time, you scan in, you're assigned a test, and then you take the test. So you drive up, they scan your QR code, they grab a kit out of the box, scan that. They're supposed to scan that label in, and then those are tied together, and then you receive your answer as to whether you have COVID or not within 3 business days. If you don't have COVID, yay! If you do have COVID, they will definitely reach out and start the contact tracing process. The problem is this part right here didn't exist when this process started. That's a problem because when they decided to do this, and I got a call, which I'll get into in a moment, we had like a day to really get this going. So this is, let's see, I don't know, on a Saturday morning, I get this email. I mean, it might have been a Saturday afternoon. I get an email from our city's IT director. Hey, this step 3, this one right here, it doesn't exist. Do you know anyone who could help us make this work? And I'm like, well, I'll do it. This sounds like a great idea for a mobile app. But yeah, I'm like, tell me some more about it. So we get this email on Saturday. It needs to be testing by Monday because they're going live on Wednesday. So it's like the perfect hackathon. And I'll get into it in a bit, kind of like I already had a bunch of the scanning code already written, which was good. Key takeaways were they can't have any data entry errors, because if you mess up getting the app or probably the patient ID associated with the test kit, someone doesn't get the right information, or even worse, someone's infected and you don't know who they are. Scary stuff. Lives are at stake when you mess up data like that. There's a lot of vendors and stakeholders involved. So you've got the people handling the survey, you've got the test kit manufacturer, you've got the city of Fishers, you've got our own health department, you've got let's see, me. Yeah, and then there was a consulting firm involved that was handling the overall effort outside of this particular piece, which was an unknown at the time. So you've got 6 different people, and you got to get all this stuff working and basically shipped by Monday. And keep in mind, I know nothing about any of these people when I get this email. But anyway, so I asked Tracy. Tracy's the guy who's our IT director, and I go, how are others handling this task? Because the state, we used the survey was from a company called Qualtrics. They handled the whole survey process, which that survey ID ends up serving as the patient ID. How are others handling this task? Well, They've got drive-up bays and then a laptop with a handheld scanner, kind of like you got at Starbucks, and a web browser running, and the patient ID is scanned in, and then they hand enter the label information from the kit, and then click next, click next, click next, and then save. It's potentially fraught with peril. I mean, the scanner could not work. I think they might have been printing the labels in real time, so the printer could break down. You've got a laptop, so if there's a power outage and the batteries aren't lasting long enough, now you can't process your patients. It's a laptop, which is not built for this sort of thing. I mean, it's unwieldy. You got to have a table for it. No one can hold it. These guys are in bunny suits. You've got a keyboard, which try having gloves on and typing on a keyboard. So if there's any issues, you have to use a keyboard and possibly a mouse. So how do you make that work? Lots of bad things using a laptop for a scenario like this. And so my thoughts here were this has to be a mobile app, but we'll get to that. And then, of course, given all of this, do we have time? Do we have time to build this thing? This needs to be live by Monday. It's Saturday. So let's get our requirements together. That's always important when you're building a mobile app or any application in general. But let's figure out what our definition of done is. So if you've never scoped out an app or an application or a software development effort before, knowing the definition of done is paramount. Otherwise, your devs don't know what they're supposed to do. I mean, you could give them tasks, but you never know when you're ready to ship the product. You just, oh yeah, we'll just keep doing this and this and this, and the project goes on forever, and you never ship it, and expectations are never managed. But you have to manage those expectations. Definition of done. So this is what we came up with and had some questions about. Number one, and this was my thought, the solution should require a PhD. Push here, dummy. It should be drop dead simple. The people in the field that are using this solution are not technical. They're trained. They're probably firefighters or EMTs, but they're not computer guys. So we have to make this simple for them. And we have to make sure that we do everything we can in the user experience, not just the code, because no one cares about the code. If the app breaks, nobody says, no one talks about how great your code solution was. They just think the app sucks suddenly. So let's make this insanely easy to use, put a lot of bozo proofing in it, etc. And consider there's very little time for training. We have to ship this thing. It has to be live by Wednesday, maybe Thursday. I think it was Wednesday, but it has to be live. There's not a lot of time for training. I had to ask, is there an API so that these surveys that Qualtrics is collecting, is there a ways for us to get access to that data, or do we have to build something? And building an API takes time, and building an API that works right and is secure takes time. It's not a 5-minute thing, and it's probably not just a few hours. It just depends, because the requirements could be very difficult to manage. Also, how do we track each entry? So every time a patient is scanned and a kit is scanned, how are we going to track that? And do we need to build an API endpoint for that? And originally, I wasn't sure if we were going to need it. But we actually ended up needing an ability to track the marriage of those two in 2 different places. And Azure, we'll get into it, but Azure Table Storage it kicks ass. And then how do we scan the data? Because these guys are wearing gloves, remember. They're not going to enter these characters, and you'll see that in a moment. Yikes. So how are we going to handle that? What about windows? Like when people drive up, how do you safely scan their information? Yeah, the handheld scanners that like Starbucks uses won't go through tint. So they have to roll down the window. If that person's infected, that's a longer exposure time for both the EMT and the patient. So we have to think about that. Actually, the team brought that up. I didn't even know. I didn't even think about that. They're like, oh, hey, by the way, this works through tint. So that was very nice. It made us safer. I had no idea. Never thought of it. So there's a QR code that you get from the survey. And then we ended up asking how do we mark the kits, because the kits don't have any identifier on them that's easily scannable. We're not going to go play around with OCR. That's just silly. So what we decided to do was use barcodes using the code 39 format. And now these days you can get a code 39 font for effectively free. There's nuances to code 39 as we found out, but that ended up working out really well. And the cool thing was we had a QR code, and then by using code 39, I'll get into it later, that actually helped in the user experience, having those two separate formats. And will the partners cooperate? Will Qualtrics work with us? Will the test team, the people who make the kits, will they work for us? The testing lab, will they work with us? How do we make all this stuff work? And everybody has their ideas about how these solutions should work. How do we do it? And then, of course, and this is important, do we have a PII info? So you're scanning people's medical information, or you're scanning people who are there for a medical procedure of sorts. So how do we protect their personal information? So we simplified all this. Those are a lot of questions to ask. How do we simplify this? So we came up with 3 things. 1, we have to easily scan the QR code and kit ID, and we have to sanity check the data. Under no circumstances, generally, should we be storing bad data. The patient must exist, the kit must be valid. Let's make sure that's the case. Come up with a kit scanning process. So originally we were talking about printing the labels in real time. I'll get into that. So having like a label printer over in the room, we decided against that because what if the printer goes bad? What if you run out of ink? What if the thermal whatever goes bad? Lots of terrible things could happen. Let's take those issues out of the equation. Let's let IT not be an issue as best we can. And so what we did, we decided we'll just pre-print all the kits, all the kit labels. And that worked out great because we could print like, a few hundred each day, and they're just ready to go. You just scan the patient, take the label, put it on the kit, scan the kit, done. Nice and easy. You don't have to worry about running out of ink. You don't have to worry about misprinted barcodes because you take care of all of that at the beginning of every day or at the evening before the day. So yay. Then storing the patient ID and kit ID for later retrieval. We were concerned about the API side, as I was saying before, but it turns out Qualtrics has a really nice API. It's well documented. I mean, it's like you couldn't ask for something better, just for an effort like this. And we ended up finding out that we could upload the kit ID as a field in the survey. So we could basically put to the survey the kit ID, and now we didn't even need a storage system, which was awesome. The API was already built. Very awesome stuff. So no backend data store. Thank God for small favors. You kind of see when Tracy and I figured out how we're going to do the labels, he picked up 5,600 of them. It was pretty nuts. So I had to keep that because I was laughing when I heard how many he had. So here's some of the things, while we were talking about this stuff, this ends up being, I'm trying to remember what, the perfect candidate for a mobile app. So with this, yeah, a mobile device already has the ability with its built-in cameras to scan a barcode, a QR code, basically any sort of code, it could scan it, pretty easily. Those libraries are out there. If you use Xamarin, we ended up using Zebra Crossing. I'll get into that in a bit. The device itself is mobile. It's, it doesn't require, it'll last all day on a single battery charge. All of these things are good. Now, we have to use that scanning because take a look. This is the patient ID. And it is case sensitive. So imagine having to manually enter that with gloves on. No effing way. You wouldn't do it. You'd give up. So we solved that with the QR code and the barcode. This right here is what we originally what I originally sketched up. If you take a look, I had a print button. Yuck. So glad that went away. So just breaking down, okay, what happens here, after something happens, QR code is on clipboard. So funny story about this. Remember when I said people had to be on board? Well, there was some pushback about I thought it should all be on one screen. And that you should basically scan the patient, scan the kit, confirm the data, save it, done. And that this should all be on one screen. At no time should it be confusing what your next step was. There was pushback from the Qualtrics side. They wanted me to launch a web browser after scanning it in. And I pushed back pretty hard on that. Yeah, they're well-intentioned because that's what the state was already doing. But just from a user experience standpoint, I can just see the technician trying to figure this out. One thing goes wrong. They're stuck in an interface that doesn't look like a mobile app. Any number of quote-unquote tabs could open. Just managing the state and their expectations would have been really bad. So I'm glad Fisher said, look, we do it your way. I'm like, yay, thank you. And it's been working out. We've had no issues. There were some hiccups on day one that weren't because of the app. And another hiccup that also was not because of the app, which is funny. It has to do with Code 39. I'll explain that one later. But we ended up getting a really great app out of this. So I want to take a moment because I've written a lot of mobile apps, and I tend to get the same, ask these like three primary needs to figure out how long is it going to take for this app to be built, and how effective is it going to be, and what are the issues and scope. So there's really three things. One, and I don't like reading from slides, but whatever. Where does the data come from? So yeah, usually this is an API or the user. And if an API doesn't exist, it can take a long time to build one. So that was what I had to ask Fishers. Where does this data come from? Can we get it easily? If we can get it easily, what data can we get? Then, once we have the data, where does it go? So, or if we create data, where does it go? When we manipulate data, where can we send it? Do we store it locally? Do we need to store it persistently? Which in this case we do. We had to persist it after we married the patient and the kit. Well, that's another API. So same issue. Do we need to build an API? And thankfully, Qualtrics had a really good solution there. And then how does the user interact with the data? So where does it come from? Where does it go? That's all great. That's very programmatic. But how the user is what matters. If the user can't figure out what to do, your app is a failure. Doesn't matter how beautiful your code is. So how do they interact with it? So we had to consider that while, who is our audience? Like I said before, they were non-technical people. It needs to be obvious to them how to get the data into the app, and then how to manipulate it in some way, and then how to send it somewhere so they can consider their job complete. And then it's just rinse repeat, because you're just going patient by patient by patient by patient. So if you're ever wondering how to build, some good questions to ask when someone says, I need you to build an app, get these 3 questions answered. Now, obviously, we're Indy Xamarin. I obviously chose Xamarin. I'm a huge fan of Xamarin. I've been using it since you had to pay for it. When it, what was it, $1,000, $2,000? And this is way before Xamarin Forms. I had to build an app for Firestone, the tire company. And I knew some Objective-C, I knew Java, but I really knew C#, and I needed to build a cross-platform solution. Or pardon me, at this time I needed to build an iOS solution. And Xamarin was just the way to go. It was the only way I could leverage most of my knowledge to build an app quickly. And handling tasks and just asynchronous operations in C# is just so much easier than in Objective-C or Java. So at least to me it was. So that's how I got really into Xamarin. And then over the years, Xamarin Forms came out. So I had Xamarin Forms back when you had to pay for it to when you didn't. So before Microsoft purchased it. So long history in Xamarin. But this was a perfect fit for Xamarin Forms. We needed iOS, Android, and Windows. They were only using iOS in the city, but I'm thinking, hey, if other municipalities want to use it, they might have Android, or be it phones or tablets. They might have Windows devices, be it tablets or laptops. Not that I'm a fan of laptops for this sort of product, but still, Xamarin makes that really easy anyway, so whatever. Of course, I only had a day or so to build this, so using a language and platform I know is paramount. And I needed to quickly build the API access and the scanning features, both of which I knew a lot about on the Xamarin side. The funny thing was, on Sunday, so this is Saturday, remember, that I got the mail, the email. I received, or I was planning on working on this mentoring app, because I'm part of the youth mentoring initiative here in Indy, and I've been working on their app. And I kind of been dragging my feet on it. It's a pro bono project, but it had scanning in it for scanning in the Safe ID for the mentors to check in at the school. So I end up working on this particular app, the COVID scanning app, patient scanning app, on Sunday instead. So I continued to drag my heels on my YMI, the mentoring app, but I was able to reuse all the scanning code that I had already written for it. So it ended up, I don't know, does that count? I don't know, but that was very cool because a lot of that had already been written. So that was very useful. So a bit about the tech. A lot of stuff got used here. Xamarin Forms, obviously, for the shared UI. Gosh, every time I look at how much code is shared, it's just phenomenal. So great job to the Xamarin team. They just keep hitting it out of the park. And the fact that they listen to the community and add features based on that and just keep things solid, that's just phenomenal. So barcode scanning, like I said, it was already mostly complete in that other app. I used zebra crossing. That's not Zing or Zixing or anything. It's zebra crossing. You can even download that from the Google Play Store if you want to check out zebra crossing, just a scanning app they wrote. But free library, been using it for years. It's very good. It's incredibly powerful. You can tell it what to scan for. You can just lots of parameters, very configurable. Now, for the API, I used, instead of using an HTTP client and Newtonsoft JSON, which I think is very common, I used refit. So refit, you define an interface and use decorators to define the endpoints. It's really cool. I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. And maybe if there's a need, I'll eventually use Poly, which if you look that up, it's really cool. So you can put in automatic retries, and you could even work this in with like Akavatch and start using like local storage or probably local caching of data. But we didn't need to go crazy on this. Refit worked great because it was very easy to understand what the endpoints were and create my client. So basically, once you've created the interface, you can just new up a client that implements that interface, and it's fascinating. You'll see it in a moment. Xamarin Essentials. I don't know anyone who doesn't use this unless they didn't know about it. But Xamarin Essentials is amazing. I think it's included. Yeah, it's included by default in all new Xamarin projects. Yeah, Xamarin Essentials it takes care of so many things for you. I've got a Xamarin Essentials video. So if you go to the Indy Xamarin playlist, or if you just look back through some of our previous presentations where I presented on Xamarin Essentials, I cover that in great detail. And actually, I think James Montemagno showed up, and he was answering questions, which was awesome. Really, really cool. He's on the Xamarin podcast. A lot of great contributions to the Xamarin community. Him and Matt Sukup. So then, of course, I ended up using Azure Table Storage because I found out that we needed to make sure people didn't scan the same kit twice. So what was happening is they would have like this sheet of paper with all the I don't know. Do I have a photo of it? I don't know if I have the. Oh yeah, you can kind of see the sheet of paper here with all the labels. Well, the problem was instead of taking the label off and then scanning it when it's applied to the test vial, some technicians were scanning it on the page with all the other labels, and they weren't verifying that they didn't scan the same kit twice. So we added that feature to prevent it. And Azure Table Storage is so incredibly powerful when it comes to just quickly standing up indexed storage. It's great. If you just have a simple key, very easy. And then I used SVGs to keep things nice and crisp on the screen. I used screen fonts rather than the default fonts. Screen fonts now I really enjoy. And then what was it called? I'm blanking on the name, but Open Sans, that's what it was. Open Sans, great font, very easy to read, lots of variations. And then for the image loading, I used FF image loading instead of the built-in stuff in Xamarin. And then Mfractor was what I used to import all the graphic assets. Import the font, even though there's an awesome font solution now in Xamarin. I didn't use that at the time. Just I used what I knew. I still have to play with the new font stuff. Very cool though. And then it would automatically resize my images that had to be resized, like the tab view images, because that doesn't support SVG, the tab icons, to all the various DPI resolutions, and then the 1x, 2x, 3x for iOS. And it does all of that practically instantly. So it saves you hours of fidgeting with paint.net. So you kind of see the first draft of the app after I worked on it. Just very 1, 2, 3. Scan the patient, scan the kit, finish the check-in. And then these right here would turn green when you selected it. or when you scan it in. So once the data was right, this would populate, these would turn green, and you would know that it is now okay to finish the check-in. I'm not sure if I get to it later, but we ended up having to revisit this a little bit, just a little bit of the color scheme. But it worked really well. You know, like people understood how to use it. You can see where I was playing with the codes. You know, so I added the ability to, when you're scanning the patient, it'll only scan QR codes, but when you're scanning a kit, it'll only scan code 39. So if you move the camera around all of this, it would only scan the right one. So that way, you know, you're making it even easier. You know, it's a simple change in code that prevents confusion by that non-technical person using the app. I think if you've ever used an app, even as a software engineer, I think you use apps and you just expect them to work. And you know, you should have that. I feel you should have that same expectation for your own software. So, yeah, that's what I did. I was like, if I was using this, you know, what might I, how might I have issues? You know, the other thing was like, what happens if your mom's using it, your kid's using it? What would happen? You know, just put yourself in those shoes of people who may not be very technical and what might occur to them, or might occur while they use an app like this. So finally, we did some tweaks. So when we were done, we ended up with this. You can kind of see what this ended up looking like. So I added bounce animations. So these bounce in. So when you scan these, this will animate. So using the animation libraries in Xamarin Forms, I made that bounce. It was very cool, and it gives you something. You know, it's not monotonous when you're using the app. It's something a little fun. I didn't go overboard and add sounds, you know, or have it go pop and wee and anything like that. But the animations at least make it less boring and not feel like you're just filling out a form over and over and over again, even though that's what you're doing. Then, of course, I already told you scanning the QR code when scanning the patient, code 39 when scanning the kit. And then I used App Center for tracking the usage and the crashes. And then based on feedback and need and listening to the Xamarin podcast, I ended up playing around with Sharpnado and blur effects to make things look a little nicer. Added manual data entry. And then additional color changes. So one complaint we had was this looks disabled. I never thought about it till I started using the app later. But this button, I ended up changing the color. You know, same here. All these buttons, so that they didn't look disabled. What about trying to get it deployed, right? So I had not used App Center all that much, oddly enough. So I'm like, hey, we'll use TestFlight. So if you've ever used TestFlight, there's basically a 24-hour minimum time for Apple to review it. So you submit the app, and then you wait. App Center would have gotten us around that, yes. And I use that religiously now, but at the time, this is what I did. And so we submitted it, and then it got rejected. That sucked. And it wasn't for anything terrible. Why was it rejected? The complaint Apple had was this app supports scanning. You have to send us QR codes to scan. And barcodes. Was it barcodes too? I'm not sure if the big complaint was the QR code. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I could send you QR codes, and you know, you're just gonna have to trust that I'm not doing anything malicious with the ones I sent you. But okay. And right here, this should have said should have used App Center. I should have updated this. Oh well. Anyway. So the funny thing is I had to give them QR codes, but you can't attach a document in test flight. So I ended up having to get these put together and then send them a OneDrive link. I'm guessing that worked because within a day it was within a few hours it was accepted and was available for testing. So, phew, that was scary because remember we had to go live by Wednesday. So rolling it out, we decided to have a dress rehearsal. So prior to this day, Tracy, right there, not this guy. He and I sat in his office with labels and all the iPhones and iPads and tested the app in various situations. We found out that the city has quite the lockdown on what SSL certs are allowed. So you can't just hit any HTTPS site. We had to whitelist the Qualtrics API, and there was something else we had to. No, I think it was just the Qualtrics API. So the phones, let's see, the iPads, their cellular connection worked. So they worked, or no, the phones worked fine, but the iPads wouldn't. One of them didn't. So we were using Wi-Fi, and it wouldn't work on the Wi-Fi enabled devices that were connected to the city's network. So we ended up having to do like an emergency call to the NOC to get things whitelisted. But everything worked out well. And the next day we had a dress rehearsal. So this is this Monday? Monday? It might be Tuesday. It might be Tuesday now. I think it was Tuesday. So we got things looking really good on Monday, and then Tuesday we decided to do our dress rehearsal. And Tracy introduced it. We're explaining it to everyone, and we even had a patient that fell asleep during the testing, but we were able to resuscitate him. It's probably, who knows, he needed oxygen, and I don't know. None of this is funny. Anyway, dress rehearsal went really well. Didn't really have any issues. The Qualtrics people, by the way, were very easy to work with. They were available even at like 9 o'clock at night when we had issues. So thanks to them. So then we passed all that, and yay, day one. Day one came through. We were super excited. Everything's been going really well. And you can see there's the app right there, or that's the device. Yay. There's all the labels, and you can kind of see, this is what those kits look like. So they don't have any labels on them. You just have, information about it. You can kind of see the masks that have to be used by the guys. They were telling me, hey, we tested this and it worked really well through this tinted glass. So they are able to spend less time. Right here, they're not scanning. They're actually just spinning it in someone's nose. You can't see that. There's all the gloves they had to use. So you can see, imagine if we had to set up a laptop here. I mean, you have no room over here. Imagine having to run power to this table just to have a scanner run. I mean, it would be insane. So the mobile app was absolutely the right approach here. We did have a couple issues. One was the scanning the kit twice. I already explained how we got around that one, basically using table storage. So we still didn't really need an API because you could just use the Azure client to store the mapping so you don't scan duplicates. But here's the funny thing. Remember I said there was a QR code that you got as so you would get a QR code sent to you after you filled out this assessment. Well, the problem was they were having to do manual data entry. So they had to set up a computer because they would scan some patients and the QR code couldn't be found in the Qualtrics system, or the patient ID couldn't be found. And so, I get just a frantic call from Tracy. What the heck's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And I'm like, boy, this doesn't make any sense, Tracy, you know? So I go, because I had signed up for the free COVID testing, and I got a confirmation email and I got a confirmation text message. So I scanned in the email's QR code in the app. Worked fine. I'm like, I don't get it. So I'm like, huh. So then I opened up the link that was sent to me in the text message, and it presents a QR code. That QR code the patient couldn't be found. So developer, yay, I drop into debug mode and I take a look at the QR code that's coming back from each of them. One of them is missing a character. So it wasn't my app that had the issue, but Qualtrics had to fix something. Luckily, it was a quick fix, but we had that one issue during the day, and then a couple days later, I had the manual data entry feature completed, just in case that happened. But then they never really had to use it, oddly enough. So whatever. That tragedy averted. The other issue that we had. Let me see here. Oh yeah, I'll get to that in a moment. The other issue that we had is right around the 2000th user or 1200th patient. The barcode stopped working, and I get another frantic call from Tracy, and he's like, "Hey, we can't scan barcodes anymore. QR codes are fine. Barcodes won't work." I'm like, what do you mean? And so I said, send me a copy of the sheet of barcodes. They're having issues. And if you know anything about code 39, the string has to be asterisk, whatever text, and then asterisk. Well, for some reason, all the barcodes after 1200 were missing the asterisks. So now it's not a valid code 39 code, it won't scan. And so I said, hey, Tracy, aren't asterisks missing? He's like, oh, crap. So all he had to do was reprint the labels and we were set. So again, not the app, but these things happen. And this is why we pre-print the labels. So imagine if that, if there was a bug in the code and you had to fix it to do, the printing. Ugh. But no, in this, you just reprint the labels, all was good in the world. So day one went fantastic. And we learned a lot. So let's look about 1 month later. We did have a day where connectivity was lost. They solved that by switching over to cellular, but in the future we'll have to figure that out. I'm trying to remember if the app crashed. I think that the app crashed because even though I'm usually good about this, I wasn't checking for connectivity. I fixed it, but it didn't matter because once they switched them over to cellular, everything was good. Testing was paramount. Had we not tested this prior to launching it, I think things could have gone badly. But I think we tested it fairly thoroughly. And I was even checking with our fire chief today, and he's like, it's been going great. It's been going like gangbusters, and we've had zero issues with the app. And that's what I think every app developer wants to hear. There's no complaints. People like using it. It just works. Those are all good things. We resisted the urge to add useless new features. We didn't need feature creep. The app does a great job doing what it's supposed to do, but we did embrace a better user experience. So by thinking about our users, and we only had one piece of feedback to make it better. Like I said, the graying it out. I think that's what helped make this a success, which, if you look right next to that, everything quiet is sometimes the best feedback. I think that's insanely true. I had to fight the good fight in the name of UX. So when there was a push to move this to be both app and web-based, I really dug in on that one. So glad I did. Manual entry is okay, but if you're not careful, people will try to bypass the rules. So we had to tighten that up a little bit. It wasn't a big deal, but there were a few people that were trying to get past some rules. What happens when printed labels fail? Like I said, with the asterisks missing, and then test flight. Just it's great. Even though we should have used App Center, test flight is really good. Azure Table Storage was so easy to set up when we needed it, so that we didn't have to build an API to do secure storage of information. And there was no PII info anyway, but the libraries there just made it very easy for us to do this. And then App Center, of course, is insanely useful. So I'm going to get into some code now. So I'll save the questions. Let me see if I can. And are there any questions before I start showing some of the code? Feel free to unmute and ask a question, or just ask it in the meeting or in the chat. Questions? Any? Oh, thanks, Jay. So I'll show you some of the stuff. Let's see, I'll just share screen one. So remember I was talking about refit. So this is really cool. You can kind of see how I did this. You can see there's the Qualtrics API key. All I have to do is say, hey, there's the headers. And look how easy that is. Just a list of strings. And then I have a put. And you'll see it just maps these. And then I have a get for the survey data. See how easy this is? Crazy simple. Oh, hold on. So how do I use that? Well, I just have this client sitting right here, which technically I could have made it static. And I just say REST service for that interface, and I pass it the endpoint URL. That's all I had to do to make this work. No HTTP clients, no configuring all the headers every single time. It's just easier to read and understand and configure. Just crazy simple. And then when it came to scanning, I'll show you what that looks like. Let's see. So you can see how I scanned. I can just say, hey, scan with the allowed barcode formats. I just say QR code. And then very simple, QR code or code 39. Very simple stuff. Yeah, so the code was very, it was just so easy to do with Xamarin. It was just so crazy easy to do with Xamarin. And it worked out really well. And here, I'll show you some of the, here, let's see if I can show you some of the usage. Let's see, Fisher's Tests iOS. So take a look at our analytics. You can kind of see, so this doesn't really mean much because it's the same users all the time. But the events are really what show what's going on. Patient saved successfully, kit stored is used. Yeah, you can see, yeah. So you kind of see how many have been, how many we've had over time. So I can actually, I was looking to see, okay, how many times was the app launched? Were there any validation errors? Very few, as you can see.
Auri, are you showing App Insights?
Yeah. Oh, is my screen not shared? Oh, I'm sorry. Look at that. I'm telling you that all this stuff is happening. And all right, now can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. You know what I did? I probably hit this instead of this. Okay. So here you can kind of see, we had patient QR code validation errors very low. Declined to continue when the kit was already assigned. So it looks like we actually had some duplicates, people trying to do some duplicate entries, but we didn't allow them to do it. Some people tried to continue, but it still won't let them save it. How many times a patient wasn't found? Practically none. So that's really good. How often was a kit stored as used? That's all in Azure table storage. Any errors saving patients? Look at that. 1. That's what you want to see as a developer. Actually, I haven't taken a look to see how many errors we have. Let's see. There. Total number of errors since we launched. These are from initial testing anyway. Look at that. 0. That's what you want to see. Always happy. None of the users care about that at all. But I enjoy it. Always good to see that. So very cool stuff. I actually probably need to close these out because they weren't real issues. Boop, boop, boop. Let's see. Go back here. Boop. Yay. So let me see over here. So any questions? And thank you very much. I should show my thank you screen, right? Thank you. So any questions? And thanks for sticking with me for an hour and a half. No? Okay. Well, if you have any questions, my info, here I'll show it again in case you have any questions. I'm Auri at auri.net. Pretty hard to figure that one out, right? Haha. And then I was lucky enough to get Auri as my Twitter handle. So way back when, my password was actually password for 3 months because there was some bug on the Twitter site that you couldn't change your password in my particular browser. But no one hacked me for 3 months. So yay, whatever. Well, thanks all. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and take care and be safe. And I'm going to stop recording now.